right. Technology is difficult sometimes, but I'm glad we got it worked out. Thank you so much for joining us and bearing with us while we got that working. I'm so glad everyone is able to hear us now. If you have questions throughout the course of the webinar, I do ask that you please use the Q&A functionality, not the chat, and feel free to type in questions anytime throughout the webinar. We're just going to give a quick introduction of ourselves, so I will go ahead and start. My name is Phil Drendall, and I am the Assistant Director of Admissions for the MSM program. I am originally from South Bend, Indiana. I am a Notre Dame undergraduate alum. I graduated in 2008, and I was in the same position as many of you, actually. I was a psychology major. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I really wish there was an MSM program at the time that would have allowed me to go into business. Instead, after 4 months of job searching and failing, I decided to move to South Korea, where I was an English teacher for 10 years. So the picture of the skyline there, that is Seoul Tower in Seoul, South Korea. I was in South Korea teaching for 10 years and then decided to move back last year. A decade in South Korea was enough time for me. So I started working here at Notre Dame. And so the other pictures of me actually in Shanghai, I was there on a recruiting trip, and I've, really made me fall in love with this program, and learning more about the MSM it made me realize this is where I want to be. I'm going to hand it over now to my colleague, Cassie. Cassie, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Phil. And thanks so much to all of you for joining us this afternoon. I assume many of you are on winter break, so also appreciate you joining us maybe when you're on vacation. So I'm Cassie Smith. I am on the admissions team here at Mendoza. So I've actually worked at Notre Dame for 6 years now. I started my career in executive MBA admissions. Previously to Phil being here, I worked on the MSM, so I'm excited to join him today for this. And then now I help with MSM, but also work on the full-time MBA side. So excited to have you all here today to share tips about the application process. A couple of the photos on the screen that you'll see with me, I actually, babies grow fast, because now my son who's in the photo is 9 months old. His name is Crew, and that is my husband, Luke. And then the photo at the bottom, just to share a little bit from a personal side about me, that is a photo of 2 combines. And so actually my husband farms full-time. We live on a farm. If you picture the middle of nowhere in your head, that's very much so where I live, where I cannot see any of my neighbors. So that's a little bit about me. But we will now dive into the reason why all of us are here today, and we will share a little bit more about the application process. So today during the webinar, we are going to go over the different components of the application and the timeline for what needs to be submitted by different dates. We will also share tips for the admissions process. I think these are helpful little hints that can very much so help you as you work through your application. We'll go over our deadlines that are coming up, and then last but not least, another reason why we're here is to answer your questions. So like Phil said before, feel free to type in your questions as we go throughout the session using the Q&A functionality. If we don't get to it during the webinar, at the end, we will then open it up for that full Q&A. Okay, I'm going to turn off our camera so we can focus here on the topic at hand, and I'm going to pass it back to my colleague, Phil.
All right, so just a general overview of the application requirements. The application for the MSM program requires 1 essay, a 4-slide PowerPoint presentation, your resume, official test scores. We accept either the GMAT or the GRE, an interview, 2 recommendations, official transcripts, and for our international students, TOEFL or IELTS score. For the resume, we do ask for just a 1-page resume, sharing your involvements on campus, part-time jobs, summer jobs, internships. All of those are valuable experiences that you bring to the table, so we would love to see those in your resume. For the recommendations, we do ask that at least one of the two, recommendations be from an academic reference. So that can be a professor, that can be an academic advisor. When you do ask someone to give you a recommendation, I feel like it's better to have someone that knows you better as opposed to someone with a higher title. So for example, if your manager at your internship really knows you and knows the great things that you have to offer, that might be a better recommendation than the president of the company who doesn't know you as well. I also recommend that when you are reaching out to those people to write letters of recommendation for you, that maybe give them some highlights of the program, highlights of the MSM, and also remind them of your strengths. Remind them why you would make a great candidate for the program. For your TOEFL and IELTS score, this is for international students only. However, if you have studied for 6 consecutive semesters in the United States, we will waive the test for you. Or if you were taught internationally, but it was in English, we can also waive those TOEFL or IELTS scores for you. So for the essay, we'll talk about the essay first. You're given 2 options. We do ask that your essay be 2 pages, double-spaced, with your name at the top. You have 2 choices of essays to write about. The first one is to tell us about a time when you achieved a goal or took on a challenge as a member of a team. And the second option is to tell us the story of a time in your life or career when you had to overcome an obstacle, start over, or rebuild. Make sure that you upload the final version of your essay to your application, and also be mindful about where you are uploading it. Sometimes it can be confusing. Uploading your essay in the wrong spot is obviously, it's not a deal breaker or anything like that, but it just makes our jobs easier to make sure that the essays are in the right spot, and also make sure that you are uploading that final version, as I said, instead of a draft. It is possible to switch it out, but just more work for you, more work for us. We want this to be an easy process. There is also an optional personal statement, and this is information that you'd like to share with the admissions committee that maybe doesn't appear elsewhere in your application. So for example, if your undergraduate GPA you feel does not represent your true capabilities, a personal statement might be a great opportunity for you to be able to speak to your strengths and to maybe explain that GPA. Cassie, do you have any tips for the essay?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Phil. So like Phil said, we recommend 2 pages double-spaced on the essay. We often get the question, oh, I went a little bit onto a 3rd page. Is that okay? That's completely fine. If you're a little over 2 pages, no biggie. If you're a little under 2 pages, that's completely fine as well. I'll also share that we very much so read every word of your application. So know that your essay is incredibly important. Have someone proofread your essay before you upload it to your application. Proofread it yourself, read it out loud to make sure you don't have any grammatical errors, because that is something we indeed are looking for as we read through the application. I'll also speak to that optional personal statement that Phil mentioned. I'm glad he brought that up. So know that that is indeed optional. It's not something, if you feel like you don't have anything additional to share, that's completely fine. Don't feel bad or that we will look negatively on your application if you don't do the optional statement. The way I look at that is that if you were standing behind me while I was reading your application or while Phil was reading your application and there was something I was looking at and you wanted to tap me on the shoulder and say, oh, but during that time I was, for example, taking calculus, I was also going through this personal hardship, for example, or I got really sick my sophomore year and I had to go home for three weeks, and that's why I didn't do as well in this course. If there's something that you just want to add a little bit more context to, that is the place to do it. I'll also share, do not write us a novel. 1 to 2 paragraphs for the optional personal statement is incredibly sufficient. So I hope that helps. I'll now pass it back over to Phil to talk about the PowerPoint section of the application.
All right, thank you, Cassie. So the PowerPoint section of the application is unique to Notre Dame. We really feel like these 4-slide PowerPoints give you the opportunity to really let your personality shine through. We're excited to see what sort of creativity you have. We're excited to see what ideas you come up with. And many people take the prompt different ways. We leave it vague on purpose because we want to see who you are. We want to see what characteristics, what passions do you have? Who are you outside of your resume? So it is a 4-slide PowerPoint presentation. Feel free to use personal pictures if you'd like. It's not mandatory. Feel free to use, clip art if you'd like. Again, not mandatory. A lot of students, a lot of applicants take different approaches to this. Some use a lot of words, some use very few words, some use a lot of pictures. A cover slide is not necessary. Some choose to do it, some don't. Again, it's a way for you to show who you are to the application, the admissions committee. So for example, one of our current students had a 4-slide PowerPoint presentation on grilling. He loves to grill. It's all about barbecuing and what kind of meat or charcoal versus propane and stuff because he loves this. Now, I haven't seen a single piece of grilled meat presented to me, kind of disappointed, but still, it was a great way for him to show his personality, show what he was passionate about outside of his resume. Make sure that you upload this as a PDF. And yeah, it's just a way for you to have fun and kind of lighten it up. We understand that the essays, the personal statements, everything like that are very formal. However, this gives you the opportunity to show who you are. We have a question about the cover slide. Some people use it as part of their 4 slides. Some people tack on the extra one. If you feel like you have enough information to cover 4 slides, I think that is, great. If you want to make your cover slide one of the 4, it's totally up to you.
Yeah, so I'll echo what Phil said. If you want to have a cover slide as part of the 4, that's great. I wouldn't add an additional cover slide and I wouldn't have 5 slides, for example. I would keep it to 4. Another tip on the slides, I would say less is more. I think oftentimes people try to put so much in there, they don't want to leave anything out, but complete it as if you were presenting it to me while we're in admissions committee. Know that you will never present these 4 slides to anyone, so it's not an actual presentation where you stand up in front of us, but create it as if you were going to do that. So like Phil said, I love what he said about really letting your personality come through that. This is the creative part of the app, so use that to your advantage. Know that you will meet one of us during your admissions interview, but you don't get to meet the full admissions committee. So how can you relay who you are as a person to people who will solely see you through the application? I'll now pass it back over to Phil. He's going to touch on the GRE and the GMAT portion of the app, which I know oftentimes is an area of the application that can be a potential stumbling block for people.
Absolutely. Thank you, Cassie. So yes, we do ask that all of our applicants take either the GRE or the GMAT. We understand that all of you come from unique backgrounds. That is one great thing about the MSM program. And so some of you may have taken other standardized tests for graduate school. This includes maybe the LSAT for law school or the MCATs for medical school. While those are very difficult tests, we understand, and they take a lot of time to study for. Unfortunately, we still ask that you would take either the GRE or the GMAT. It's just a way for us to make sure that our applicants and the students coming into our program are able to do the work and able to, succeed in our program. You do get the choice of the GRE or the GMAT. I will say that the majority of MSM applications do indeed take the GRE over the GMAT, just simply because the GMAT is more quantitative based, while the GRE is not quite so quant heavy. So sometimes that is a little bit friendlier to our applicants. Know that your official score or any unofficial score does not have to be received prior to application submission. In other words, you are able to apply to the MSM program without a GRE or a GMAT score. So if you have a GRE or GMAT scheduled for the future, simply put that in your application and we'll make sure that is connected to your application so that as we process your app, that future test date can be kept in mind. Also, as far as these numbers are concerned, so at the bottom of the screen, you'll see that the middle 80% range for our GRE is 296 to 324, and the middle 80% range for the GMAT is 560 to 710. Know that here at Notre Dame, we don't have any minimum hard cutoffs, no requirements like that. We look at every application holistically. These are more just guidelines. This is an average taken from our current class, our current MSM class. If your test score does not quite fit these numbers, it's not a deal breaker. It's more of just a guideline. I will say that for official tests, for your test scores, it's a lot easier to change your test scores than it is to maybe change your GPA. So if you feel like your GPA is lacking a little bit, the test might be a great way to make up some ground to really show your capabilities and your strengths. Cassie, do you have any tips about the tests?
Yeah, great, Phil. Thanks for sharing that. I'll say that know that the GRE and the GMAT, they're not intelligence tests. It's very important to prep for those exams. Do I think it's necessary to sign up for a 6-month prep course where you pay a bunch of money? No, I don't think that's necessary. But I do think it's incredibly helpful to do a few online practice tests or go to Barnes & Noble and buy a practice exam book, because that very much so will help you know the structure of the exam. I think knowing that going into the test, I've seen people perform on average better because they have obviously done some preparation. I'll also say that one thing that's great is that you can retake the GRE or the GMAT. That is completely fine. With the GRE, we will also super score your score. So say you do better on the quant the second time but worse on the verbal, the admissions committee will always see your best score. So we will super score that for you, and that can be valuable as well. So know that retakes are okay. We don't look down on you if you take the test more than once. I've had people take it 5 times before, which I also don't think is necessary, but know that we're also happy to counsel you in this regard. If you take the test and you get, let's say, a 305 or something, feel free to reach out to Phil. He is more than happy to counsel you as to whether he thinks you should take the exam again or not. So we are here to guide you through the admissions process, and we want to help you make the best decision for you. And so we're happy to help. Obviously each situation is unique, but happy to help you walk through that process. To give you an exact perspective of where the average is, we're right at a 308 for the current class for the GRE. That's quant and verbal added together. And then for the GMAT, we're at a 660.
And also, if you're unsure about which test to take, go to the GRE website, go to the GMAT website. They have practice tests, practice questions, so you can kind of get an idea of which one might be better suited to your skills.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Phil. Phil will now touch on the interview piece of the application, which I know also can sometimes cause people a little bit of anxiety, right, Phil?
Absolutely, Cassie. So the interview, yes, it can be a source of concern for many people. So during the review process of your application, the admissions committee may request an interview from you. Know that not all applicants receive an invitation to interview, so after you submit your application, make sure to keep an eye out in your inbox for that invitation to interview. Interviews are completed both here on campus at Notre Dame in South Bend or virtually using Zoom. If you happen to find yourself in lovely South Bend, Indiana, and want to interview before you actually apply for the program, that's absolutely fine. that is only available for on-campus interviews. We don't offer that through Zoom interviews. Just a quick note on the Zoom interviews. Obviously, all of you here know how to use Zoom. You are using it right now. Know that we don't expect everyone to come to campus. We don't knock off points for a Zoom interview or anything like that. We will conduct those Zoom interviews the exact same way that we would an in-person interview. We know that with your busy semesters coming up, with your location, with the unpredictable weather, it's not always possible to get on campus, and that's absolutely fine. Zoom is a great tool that we use to be able to get to know each other. And interviews do last about 45 minutes to an hour. Make sure that, again, you keep an eye on your inbox for that invitation to interview.
Great, thanks, Phil. And a couple more tips on the admissions interview. Know that the interview is very much so a conversation. We say it's a conversation, not an interrogation. You would most likely be interviewing with either Phil or me or another member of our admissions team. So we're not that scary, right, Phil?
Well, I don't think so.
And so it's very much so a time for us to get to know you better. So who are you as a person? Why are you interested in the MSM? Why are you interested in Notre Dame as a whole? So treat this very much so as a professional interview. Dress professionally. Be prepared for the conversation. Know we will be looking at your resume prior to the interview, so know what's on your resume before you come in, because you most likely will get a question about something on it. But also take a deep breath before you come in. I think it's something where oftentimes people applying to the MSM, you've most likely never done something like this before, and that's okay, and we know that, but use it as a learning experience and as a way, obviously this program in general is a way to help hopefully launch yourself into a career or into a new career path. And so think of it as a practice session for going into future job interviews, I would say. So I will now pass it back over to Phil. He's going to touch on a few other parts of the application, and then we'll go from there.
All right, thank you so much, Cassie. So this next part here is very important to many of you. This is our fellowships section. Fellowships is the word that we use here at Notre Dame for scholarships. These are award-based on merit. So merit-based scholarships, and it is a part of your application. On the additional information section of your application, you will choose either yes, I would like to be considered for a merit-based fellowship, or no, I would not like to be considered for a merit-based fellowship. Please choose which one you would like at this time. There are no points taken off for not choosing a fellowship. Don't think that if you choose no, I don't want to be considered for a fellowship, that means that you will be guaranteed entry. We understand that graduate school is expensive, and we want to make sure that you are able to realize your dreams. So last year, over 85% of the class received some sort of award. So, and when you are admitted, that amount of fellowship will be listed in your admit letter. So it will come together with your decision. Should you get admitted, your fellowship amount will then be connected to that admissions letter. Cassie, do you have any more information about what it means to receive a fellowship?
Definitely. So basically, if you indeed are admitted to the program and we award you a fellowship, know that there are no strings attached. The only thing that we ask of you is that you be an active member of the Notre Dame community. Participate in class and be involved in clubs or intramural sports on campus. We're just looking for you to be an active member of what this place stands for and an active member of your class. One thing that I love about the MSM is that typically on average we have right around 50 students in the cohort, and the class becomes incredibly close. And so individuals who receive awards, I want you to be a part of that closeness, right? I want you to give back to your class and give back to this place. Yeah, because you want to, right? So I don't know, Phil, as an undergrad, do you have anything to add there?
I also think it's incredibly easy to be a connected part of Mendoza and Notre Dame as a whole. There's so many opportunities available to you here. Again, something that totally separates Notre Dame from all of the other schools is that not only do we develop your skills inside the classroom, but we really encourage you to develop and grow outside of the classroom as well. So from Mendoza-specific clubs, to MSM-specific clubs, all the way to clubs that are open to the entire university. It's not hard to give back. It's not hard to be an active member of the community. So if that's something you're worried about and that might deter you from choosing to receive a fellowship or not, absolutely don't let it. A lot of students now are contributing members to the Mendoza Society without even maybe realizing it.
I love that, Phil.
So this next slide is also very important. So as a thank you for attending this session today, we are going to waive your $50 application fee. So at the bottom of the additional information page where you found the fellowship information, there will be an area to enter a fee waiver code. Make sure that you enter the code in all caps and all one word. So it's going to be Irish Web. Again, Irish Web, all capital letters, all one word. And this will be able to waive your $50 application fee. This is going to be really important for the upcoming application deadline. So our round 2 application deadline is coming up next week, Tuesday, January 14th. Know that by this deadline, all we need on our end is simply your portion of the application. So that's your essay, again, 2 pages, double-spaced, resume, 1 page, your 4-slide PowerPoint presentation, and then all of the information filled in on the application for your test scores, your recommendations, your transcripts. All of that can come after you submit your application. And then with the round 2 application deadline of January 14th, you will have a decision mailed to you by February 28th. Know that the round 2 deadline is our largest round of the year, so I really encourage you to apply at this time. The earlier that you apply to the MSM program, the more seats that are available, and also the more fellowship money that is also available. So while you may feel that you're not quite ready, January 14th, next Tuesday, still a little bit of time to get everything together, get all of your ducks in a row, and to apply. Yeah. Do you have anything else to add, Cassie?
Yeah, so if you miss that January 14th, it's not the end of the world, but because we only need your portion of the app, and know that it's January 14th at midnight.
Yes.
And also a tip for that, we will not pull everything until 8 a.m. Eastern time on January 15th. So if you need to stay up until 3 a.m., that's completely fine. The app will not shut down, for example. So like Phil said, we encourage you to apply by that date. If you are an international student, we very much so encourage you to apply by that February 11th deadline at the latest. That way, if you are admitted to the program, we have ample time to process your visa, and that it's not a stressful experience for you, because sometimes that can take a little extra time. So I will now pass it back over to Phil. I know we've had a number. Do you have anything else to add with the deadlines, Phil?
Nope. So I just, again, what Cassie said, for the international applicants, that February 11th deadline is pretty important. It is possible for us to process your application and to get all of the I-20s and visa stuff figured out after that fact, but it's a lot of hassle for you as well. Sometimes the embassies are really unpredictable, and we don't want you scrambling and feeling stressed out before you come to campus.
Definitely.
We want this to be the most enjoyable 11-month experience of your life. And so if you're worried about the visa stuff, then that makes it less enjoyable. So really aim for that February 11th application deadline. If you're ready to apply by the January 14th deadline, absolutely do that as well.
I love that. Okay, we will now open it up for questions from you. I know we've had a number of questions that have come in during the webinar, so we will start going through these. Feel free, like we said earlier, type in your questions to the Q&A functionality, and we will answer these. Don't use the chat, use the Q&A. So I have a question here. Can one of the recommendations, Phil, I'll pass this to you, can one of the recommendations come in after the deadline?
Absolutely. All we ask is that you have your portion of the application completed by the time that deadline happens. We understand that you are also not in control of the people that are writing your recommendations. Maybe they're busy, maybe they're out of the office for a couple of days. It is totally fine if they do not have your letter of recommendation into us by that application deadline. We understand. So no, don't worry about that. Just again, have your portion of the application, essay, resume, PowerPoint, and the rest of the information to fill in on the application.
Awesome. We have a couple questions here about years of work experience regarding the MSM. So these are great questions. We recommend that individuals have 2 years or less of work experience when applying to the MSM. I'll share that the majority of students do come into this program directly out of undergrad, but I'll say that it's right around like a 75-25% split. So typically right around 75% of students come directly out of undergrad. And then we oftentimes have right around a fourth of the class of people who have some form of work experience. That may mean that you've done a year of service, or you've done a year-long internship, or you just haven't quite found that full-time spot yet, and that's okay. We had someone specifically ask about the fact that they have 3 years of work experience. What I would recommend there is if you will send your resume to us at msm.business@nd.edu. Again, msm.business@nd.edu. Phil can then counsel you as far as whether this program is the best fit, or maybe another one of our grad programs is a better fit. So great question.
Okay, so we also have another question about class size. So our typical class size for the MSM program, usually we aim for around 50 students in the cohort. So around the 50-person range, right?
Yeah, so typically the class lands at 48 to 52. We keep the class small on purpose. We want you to very much so have a lot of intentional interaction with faculty members, but then also we want you to have a very strong one-on-one relationship with your career coach, because that's very much so you're here to get an education, but you're also here to hopefully find that next step and find that spot to launch your career. Someone's asking specifically how many applications or how many students we admit every round or every year. It varies year to year. It varies round to round. Like Phil said, round 2 is indeed our largest round. You are by no means late to the game. We had a few rounds in the fall, but very much so the majority of apps for the MSM indeed come in the spring. So if you submit for round 2, in my opinion, you're still ahead of the game. And keep in mind, we don't just admit 50 students, right? Because not all 50 choose us, unfortunately. So we do admit more than 50, just to keep that in mind as you work through your app.
Thank you so much for your questions.
Another question we have here is, if I submit an application with a future GRE test date, what is the latest date I could send my scores in by? That is a great question. We would need to have your official scores by March 1st in order for you, wrong dates. Let me go back here to our dates. Sorry, thinking about another program. So your release date is February 28th. I would say that we would need your test scores by Friday, February 21st in order for us to still be able to send your file to the admissions committee. If you're not able to get us your scores by that point, it's not the end of the world. We will still evaluate you then between rounds. So you wouldn't then necessarily have to wait until March 13th to get your decision. We would most likely evaluate you between rounds, if that makes sense.
Right. We would just ask that as soon as you do have that test date, let us know so we can attach that to your application, and then we'll be able to hopefully get that processed as soon as we have that test score. So we have another question here. Can I work full-time while pursuing the MSM? what is the course load like? So the MSM program is indeed a full-time program. It's an 11-month full-time program that unfortunately makes it very difficult to complete while working full-time simultaneously as studying in the MSM. So the course load, we have 3 semesters. We have a summer semester, a fall semester, and a spring semester that are quite busy, I will say. I think, unfortunately, it would be very difficult to work while also studying for your MSM. Is that right, Cassie?
Yeah, it's basically impossible. I will share that some students do choose to work part-time. Like Phil shared, we understand that it's expensive to do a graduate program, so many students will do some type of on-campus work, or they may work in the South Bend community part-time, but working full-time is highly discouraged and basically impossible because your classes are on campus and during the day, like Phil said.
We also have another question about the GRE scores. So does your GRE score make up a large component of your admissions potential? Is that number is very important for Notre Dame? So like I said, we look at your application holistically. So we look at all parts of the application. We read every word of your application. There is no minimum cutoff. There is no, magic number that we're looking for as far as GRE is concerned. If it doesn't quite meet that average score, but other areas of your application are very strong, it might not even be that big of an issue. If you're really worried about it, I would recommend that maybe you send me an email, again at msm.business@nd.edu. And I'll be able to counsel you a little bit on whether or not I think your current GRE test score would work with our current class.
Yeah, so and along those lines, we shared like the middle 80% average for the GRE. So obviously you can see that many people in the current class are under the average score. So like Phil said, every piece of the puzzle is important. Every piece of your application is important. And I think that's actually somewhat unique to how we do things here at Notre Dame, is that we really care about who you are as a person. We don't simply judge you solely by your undergraduate GPA and your GRE score. So great question.
Yes. We have another question about transcripts. So are study abroad transcripts required? We do ask that all transcripts from places where you have studied for undergraduate be attached to your application. So if you studied a semester abroad, we would indeed ask that those transcripts also be submitted.
Unless there's only one instance where we wouldn't need that. If your actual grades are on your undergrad transcript for that study abroad semester, that's fine, but typically they are not. So we would indeed need a transcript, like Phil said, from that specific school where you studied abroad. And then another question that's come in, is there anything specific you would want to see from us on the PowerPoint presentations? This is a question we get a lot. We actually leave it loose on purpose. So we don't recommend specific things we want to see on those PowerPoints, because we want you to be creative and tell us more about who you are. Phil used the example of grilling. I think that's, it's random hobbies. It's maybe it's a lot about your family or where you grew up, or how you want to change the world. I don't know. I've had people share that they visited all 50 states or every major league ballpark, things like that. So it could be your bucket list. Well, it's very open-ended because we just want to learn more about who you are and what your personality is like.
Absolutely. We want to see who you are outside of your resume, and also things that we can't find other places in your application. So we understand that with the application, we're able to see a lot about who you are in 5 different places. The PowerPoint is your opportunity to maybe share something that's important to you that we aren't able to see elsewhere in your application or on your resume or in your essay. This is really your chance to be creative, to show who you are. Again, like I said before, Pictures are great, not required. Cover slide is fine, not required. We just ask for PowerPoint slides. And as Cassie mentioned before, less is more. Okay.
Definitely. Well, it looks like we've tackled all the questions. Does anyone else have any final question? We had someone that reached out and said that they graduated 4 years ago. Is that, just based on that, is that an issue when applying to the program? I would say email us your resume, and then we will, just like we talked about, we would be able to better coach you as to whether the program is potentially a fit or not. So again, msm.business@nd.edu. I'm going to turn our camera back on. One thing before we close out, and I'll let Phil share a few final words as well. We actually have, oh, we're zooming out here. Let's zoom back in. We actually have an on-campus event coming up. So if you are interested, if you're in the area or interested in coming in, we have something that's called MSM Domer for a Day. It's on Friday, February 7th. And actually, we will pay for your hotel room if you come in for the Thursday night, February 6th. That day is very much so a great way to live a day in the life of an MSM student. So you'll meet current students, you'll hear about the admissions process, you'll hear about working with career services, you'll really get to learn about what it's like to live in South Bend and to be a part of the Notre Dame community. So we'd love to have all of you join us if that date works for you. Or if you're a Notre Dame undergrad on campus, stop by for the parts that work well with your schedule. We would love to have you. So this week is the last week to reserve a hotel room. And so you have until Friday to book that room. So you can register on our website, and maybe Phil, if you'll send the link out to register for that as a follow-up to the online session, so that if people want to indeed visit campus, that is a great way to do so. So I will pass it over to Phil. I appreciate you all joining us today. Any last words, Phil, for the group?
So absolutely, I would encourage you to check out the Domer for a Day event. A lot of you maybe got email reminders earlier this week, yesterday. If you missed that email, that's absolutely fine. So as Cassie mentioned, the deadline to reserve your complimentary free hotel, it's not often you get something free.
And you get to stay on campus.
And you get to stay on campus.
In a really nice hotel.
Yes, it is nice. That's going to be extended to Friday. So I am going to send out one more final link on Friday so that you will get the chance to make sure that that time works for your schedule. It really is a wonderful opportunity to get to see the life of an MSM student, to meet all of the different people that will play a huge role in your development here at Notre Dame. And also, if you've never been to campus, there's a reason that we are consistently ranked one of the most beautiful campuses in America. Amen. Even though it is February, it is absolutely gorgeous. There's no snow on the ground. So right now, fingers crossed, there won't be at that time either. But it's going to be just a wonderful opportunity. Feel free to email me any questions you might have about the application process. Also, next week, Monday, January 13th, the day before our round 2 deadline, I'm going to have one more webinar, just a program overview webinar. So if you still have some final questions, you're not quite sure about the MSM, if it's the right fit for you, please feel free to register for that and see my lovely face one more time as I just give a quick rundown of the MSM program. And maybe that will be the information that you need to push you over the edge and apply by that January 14th deadline at midnight.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Phil.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of your week, everyone. Yes. And go Irish, right?
Go Irish.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Have a great night.